I should say that I just took over being director, and so I'm getting all the credit for this, but it's really Farrell Janov, my predecessor, who did all the work here. So Larry's one of our speakers, and his talk is about cowboys in the movies, specifically history of the singing cowboy. Larry has been collecting memorabilia of the singing cowboy since the 70s, with extensive research on Roy Rogers and Dale Evans. His interests are history of singing cowboys from the 30s through the 60s. He got his bachelor's and his master's from KU, and he has been giving lectures and teaching classes on singing cowboys through the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at KU, so you're welcome. This is free.
Yeah, that's true.
All right,
That's
so
true.
Larry's going to give us a talk, and we should have plenty of time for questions at the end.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Take it away.
Thank you. Yeah, we're going to, although the title was Cowboys and Movies, we're really going to be concentrating on singing cowboys. And singing cowboys really started out in the movies back in the 1930s. As she mentioned, the Osher program is really 6 hours. So we're going to do in about 35 minutes here what we try to do in Osher over a longer period of time. So we're going to concentrate on specific people today. I've been a collector all of my life. Started in the mid-70s to start collecting Roy Rogers and memorabilia, and have several hundreds and thousands of pieces now, some down at the Toy and Miniature Museum. If you happen to be down there, there's a display down there of them. There's some out in the lobby, and there's a heck of a lot at home. At any rate, we're going to talk about Roy. He's someone that helped me distinguish between right and wrong when I was little. We used to have a, I grew up in Welda, Kansas, south of Garnett, south of Ottawa. And a little town, all we had was a grocery store, post office. We used to have a gentleman bring a big red truck in on Saturday nights. They would close off the graveled main street, put up a big screen, and if you help him set out the wooden chairs, you got free popcorn, and you could watch Roy and Gene and Dale perform on the screen. So I grew up with Roy. Gene Autry was just a little 3 or 4 years before my time, so I really liked Roy the best. At any rate, we're going to tell you about Roy. He helped me live by the golden rule, get a sense of what was right and wrong. I lived on a farm and played at a gravel pit. I would get my bag and put an extra concealed gun, like that's even legal now. I had a concealed gun then. And put telescope, binoculars, a writing pad in case I had to take notes of something, and took out to the gravel pits and played around. If I was doing that again today, I would take a guitar and be a singing cowboy. But my folks made me quit that when I was about 21 years old. Couldn't play out in the gravel pits anymore, so became more serious about collecting. We're going to talk about Leonard Sly. Leonard Sly was born in Cincinnati, Ohio. He actually, second base of old Riverfront Stadium, the old baseball stadium where the Cincinnati Reds play, that was where his home sat. And of course the Reds have a new stadium now, but that's where he originally was from. Hi folks. Yeah, you can pull a chair over or sit there. If you sit here, you have to be on TV a lot. Oh, no, not really. No.
Sorry.
We'll let you through there. Anyway, early on, his father built a houseboat, and they lived on the houseboat for several years. Got off the houseboat, moved back into town of Portsmouth, Ohio. And there he started working while he was in high school in a shoe factory with his father. He had to quit school and help earn money. He worked for $17 a week at a shoe factory. In fact, they walked several miles into the factory and every night walked back out to the family farm. As you can picture, not an exciting life particularly. Leonard first, was bored with it all. One of his sisters had moved to California. He finally convinced his family to load up in this old Ford truck, just like the Grapes of Wrath. If you saw that movie, that truck looks just like the ones in Grapes of Wrath. Went out to visit his sister. He became enthralled with California. They came back home, but he convinced them, let's go out there. Let's go out there and get a job and make a living. They became fruit pickers, which wasn't much of a living, but they at least were surviving. Leonard learned how to play the guitar in the evenings. He and his cousin formed the Sly Brothers, not orchestra, but the singing duet, performed around the area. We're not really particularly successful. We're going to skip through a lot of this. There's a lot of details you're not going to know about. At any rate, he's in California. He, in a few years, stumbles across two guys, Bob Nolan and Tim Spencer. Together, they formed a group called the Pioneer Trio. Well, they had some success and not success. Bob Nolan quit, came back, different ones. They finally met a radio producer that decided the Pioneer Trio sounds like you're an old bunch of guys. You need to have a younger name, and thus they became the Sons of the Pioneers and started having some success in the area. Also started since they were in California, having bit parts in movies, several bit parts in Gene Autry movies. Roy, we may be able to see a clip of Roy is even in a black hat, plays the bad guy, has to go to jail. The only way he gets out of jail is if they sing a song, and that'll come up. At any rate, he's working for Republic Studios, who's headed by a gentleman named Herb Yates. And Herb Yates was a very tight-fisted head guy of Republic Studios, made life very difficult for Gene Autry, Roy, Monty Hale, and a lot of the Cowboys that were performing for Raye. Would not pay them much at all. I think Roy started out at $75 a week and signed a 7-year contract. So he was bound in. Herb wouldn't let him out, wouldn't pay him more. That became a big battle with Gene Autry, and Gene finally challenged him, quit, would not perform in a Western called Under Western Stars. So Herb Yates, Republic, was looking for who's going to star in this one. Leonard hears about this. At this point in his life, Leonard Sly was performing as Dick Weston. And he goes and tries out for Under Western Stars, gets the part, but they want to change his name. They don't like Dick Weston. Rogers was a very familiar name with the American public, with Will Rogers. Everybody liked that name. Why don't we find something to go with Rogers? Roy, means king. Roy Rogers, very alliterative. And Leonard Sly, Dick Weston becomes Roy Rogers, stars in his first film, Under Western Stars. Big hit, starts making leading roles for Westerns for Republic, and goes through about 4 or 5 years before a lady comes along that will star with him. Let's back up one and talk about Frances Octavia Smith. Was born in Uvalde, Texas, and very precocious little child. In fact, the first 3 days, I'd not heard of it before, but she was in twilight sleep and didn't speak or make a sound for 3 days, I guess. Became a very precocious child, ran away several times as a little girl. They would pick her up several miles away down the road on the family farm in Texas. Grew up really with the grandparents. Her mother really wasn't raising her as much as the grandparents. But she skipped the 2nd and 7th grade, really bright little girl, but on her own most of the time. Frances marries a gentleman, Tom Fox, when she's 14 years old. She has a child. Her husband leaves. So she has stuck there with the child on her grandparents' farm. And the grandparents, of course, have a great deal of raising the child. Frances goes off, tries to get jobs in various communities, gets over clear to Memphis, has a singing voice and gets on some of the radio shows over in different areas, but always comes back to the farm. Eventually, she runs across someone in Chicago well, I back up another one. She's married, got the child at 14. She marries again in 1940, and that marriage only lasts 6 years, I believe it is. So she's traveling all over the country while her child is back with the grandparents. She becomes a performer over the radio. She's on Chase and Sanborn Hour with Charlie McCarthy, if you remember that. She sang with them. During this time, she's changing her name more than once. She was a Maxine, something else. Finally, she gets an agent, Bill Rivkin, who suggests Dale Evans is short. Everybody can catch on to that real quick. And so Frances becomes Dale Evans and starts performing on the radio around the country. She's invited to Hollywood a couple of times, but did not particularly want to go out there till finally her agent says, let's go to Hollywood, give it a try in the movies. Dale goes out there, and the first thing the agent and others tell her to do, she's going to have to cap her teeth, lose some weight, get her nose fixed, and maybe then she can have a screen test. Well, Dale's obstinate about it all, refuses to do all of that until later she will have it performed. But she does have the screen test. They like her. The agent tells her they're not going to hire you as a 28-year-old, what you are. You say you're 21. For sure, you don't tell them you have a child, this boy. So she passes her child off as a brother, which later becomes a problem for the son, convinces her that's not right, but we'll skip all of that. At any rate, she lines up and thinks she's got a shot at Holiday Inn. You remember who was in Holiday Inn? Bing Crosby, Fred Astaire. Thinks she's got a shot at that. Big problem though, she couldn't dance. So loses the part that she thought she was going to get, but did have a screen test and did get signed for $400 a week. So she's sitting around. She lost 12 pounds, got her teeth capped. Then she was scheduled to start another musical, Campus in the Clouds. It was scheduled to start in December 1941. What happens in December 1941? Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor gets bombed. They cancel the movie, so she's out again, her second big chance. She has some small roles, but doesn't really get anywhere. And finally, she hires a new agent, Art Rush, who just happens to be the agent for a singing cowboy that's making big movies over in Republic Studios. And of course, that's Roy Rogers. So she gets to go over, try out for a movie with Roy Rogers. The first one together they have is The Cowboy and the Senorita, that we'll show a clip of here in a little bit. And they become a big hit together. Dale ends up making 28 movies with Roy's 81 that he made. So they are a hit right off the bat. They each have children from previous marriages. By this time, Dale has married the third time to a Richard Butts was his name. And it's not that they didn't get along, it's that they traveled in different worlds. Dale's out in Hollywood, and her husband, Dick, did I say Dale? It's Dick Butts, is back in Chicago. So they end up divorcing. So this is the third marriage that has not happened for Dale. In the meantime, Roy is married to Arlene, and they have had two natural children before a third one is born, Dusty, Roy Rogers Jr., but Arlene passes away after 6 days. She has an embolism and dies from the childbirth for Dusty. So here's Roy. He's got 3 children. Dale has 1. And they're getting to know each other through the movies, are good friends because they've made several now together. And it's on a pre-ride out into the rodeo circle up in Chicago that Dale leans over before they gallop out into the arena and leans over and say, why don't we get married? And then he gallops on out into the arena, and Dale comes on out and agrees, and they are married on Christmas Eve New Year's Eve of 1947, December 31st, 1947. So now they're together, but Dale still doesn't like making the westerns. She thinks she wants to be in musicals. So she drops out. They had made several together. She dropped out and went back to trying to get into musicals. Here again, late 1940s, she's supposed to star in another western. Show Business Out West was the name of it, and Republic. It was a flop. As she made a couple others, they were flops. So she was just sitting around moaning and groaning. She was about ready to get Art Rush, but get rid of her agent, because he was paying attention to Roy Rogers. He wasn't paying attention to her. Drops him, but coincidentally goes into a commissary where Roy's having lunch one day. They're both at Republic Studios. Roy convinces her, look, it's not going so well for you. Come on back, and we'll make more westerns together. Roy did have a reservation about how Dale rode a horse. His quote was, "A lot of sky between her and the horse." Hadn't really learned to do. In fact, her caps on her teeth fell out once while gappling down. The horse trampled on them. So she had to have that redone. Anyway, they did have the hits and made a total of 24 movies together. In the meantime, they're adopting children, and you're probably aware. They ended up with 9 children between them. 6 were adopted. Robin, the only child they had natural for both of them, if you remember, was Angel Unaware. Dale wrote the book about the Mongoloid child Robin and her death after 2 years. And they also tragically lost 3 other kids to accidents. Sandy, the boy, had some mental challenges in his life, but got into the Army in Germany. Some of his pals convinced him to do too much drinking, and he died from over drinking. They lost Deborah Ann, a little American Indian girl, in a church bus accident, and they lost one other child by an accident. So they had some tragedies in their life together. Of course, we were talking about earlier, Dusty, Roy Rogers Jr., performed in Branson, and several years they've closed the museum down there now, and he travels every once in a while, but not performing very often anymore. At any rate, along with Roy and Dale comes a lot of sidekicks. We'll see a clip or 2 of them. In fact, we're going to concentrate on the clips more than telling about their lives. Gabby Hayes was a vaudeville entertainer with his sister, made lots of money, and retired very early on in the mid-1920s. 1929, what happens? The crash happens, they lose all their money, so Gabby has to get back into entertainment. His sister doesn't want to, so Gabby tries out in Hollywood, gets bit parts as a Western sidekick. In fact, he's in this movie with John Wayne in 1934, I think it is, but becomes a famous sidekick of Roy's, and ends up making, I think, 41 movies with Roy. Roy has a lot of sidekicks through the years. One terrible sidekick, in my opinion, was Pinky Lee. Do you remember Pinky Lee? Because of contractual obligations, Roy had to take him in 3 of his movies, and they're pretty bad. They really are. As far as Pinky, that wasn't his life. He's not a cowboy sidekick. He's something else. At any rate, Roy had several of them. And of course, as famous as Roy and Dale is Trigger. Trigger was Golden Cloud. He was owned by Bing Crosby at one time. Bing sold him to Hudkins Horse Ranch, where a lot of the movie horses came from. Roy bought Golden Cloud for $2,500 on installment because he couldn't afford to buy him thing, but changed his name to Trigger, How he got his name as Trigger is up in the air. A lot of different explanations of that. One was Smiley Burnett said that this horse could stop on a dime. You know, he was trigger happy, and I don't know if that's true or not. But anyway, Trigger was in most of the early movies. Actually, Trigger had a repertoire of movies before that. He was in Robin Hood with Errol Flynn, and Olivia de Havilland rode him in that particular movie. So Trigger was already in the movies before Roy. And of course, if you know about movie horses, all of them were not Trigger in Roy movies. Trigger died in 1965, I believe it was, after 31 years of age, but he was replaced much earlier by Trigger Jr., who's in a lot of the movies. And Trigger Sr. We'll see dance in some of the movies. Trigger Jr. could do that. Little Trigger comes up, and we're going to see Little Trigger with Bob Hope in a clip here in a little bit. So just like Champion for Gene Autry, there was Champion Jr. and several other champions in the movies, and of course that had to be the case because they were trained to do different tricks. Trigger probably was the most versatile in the way of tricks as well as dancing. I don't remember which movie it is, but you can see him running behind a truck and they're rolling barrels off the back, and Trigger and Roy are jumping these barrels as they come off this truck. And they did it live, and very difficult, as you can imagine, to negotiate those barrels. At any rate, had a lot of things. Anyway, we're up toward the end of the movie career. He made 81 movies, only one of which was not really a Western, although it had Western flavor. The name of it was Dark Command. It was John Wayne, Walter Pidgeon, Marjorie Main from Ma and Pa Kettle, and it was about Quantrill's Raiders. And Roy played the brother of Claire Trevor in the movie, and he was about fourth or fifth lead in that movie. The only non-Western he ever made. He made one later in life in 1976, Macintosh and TJ, where he played an older cowboy that was bringing up this 12-year-old and showing him the ropes. He semi-adopted him because of the circumstances. But if you back up a ways, after the movies, after his contract ran out, Roy refused to sign on with Republic anymore. Herb Yates wanted him to stay, of course, but Roy heard of this new thing that was happening that Gene Autry was getting in a little bit, television, and decided in 1951 he wasn't going to be with the Republic anymore. He was going to make TV shows. They have a big court battle that covered 2 years, but Herb Yates sued him because Herb wanted to show Roy Rogers movies on television, and Roy didn't want those movies to come out because it's going to hurt his TV show. So finally Roy wins, gets them on television. The ruling was overturned a year later, but it was too late. Roy's already on these TV shows, makes 101 TV shows. Dale is with him in all of those. He has a new sidekick, Pat Brady, who performed with the Sons of the Pioneers through a lot of years. So Pat is driving this new contraption that Roy came up with, Nellie Bell, the Jeep. Instead of a horse, Pat gets to ride Nellie Bell. Roy built Nellie Bell. He had heard kids in the neighborhood where they were living talk about the Jeeps that were going by and how how much conversation was going on. Roy thought, well, this is a good gimmick. We'll put this on the TV show. So he builds this Jeep, and out of different parts, puts a man underneath the steering wheel, so when you see Pat running behind the Jeep, actually there's somebody in the Jeep driving. They've rigged it up, of course. But Pat Brady was the big sidekick in the TV shows. One of the collectibles that I have is a pedal car of Nellie Bell. It's probably the rarest piece I have. There were 2 colors made, but I have not seen a live one anywhere else, but they're out there. But it's fun to finally find something that stands out. Okay, so through all the TV shows, after that, Roy and Dale perform at a lot of rodeos, and maybe I think one or two of you mentioned you'd seen them at Oklahoma City or someplace perform. Roy, however, made his big money in merchandising, endorsed hundreds and hundreds of products. A lot of them sold through Sears. Gene Autry also had done that, but Gene had success with that, but Gene really made his money real estate, radio stations. Gene ended up with 5 stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. I forgot, for television, movies, recording artists, rodeos, and whatever the 5th one would be. Gene made big time money. In fact, one of his sidekicks, we probably won't get to see a clip of Gene and his sidekick, Pat Buttram, made the comment, Gene used to ride out into the sunset, now he owns it. Because Gene had millions toward the end, and still his surviving spouse, Jackie Autry, I just saw in Western Clippings, if you take that Western publication, she had donated several $1 million to something, I forgot what. So still lots of money out there from Gene's investments. Very smart businessman, but you may have a different opinion, but I didn't think he was a particularly great actor, and he didn't either. But he very famous for his singing ability. In fact, bit of trivia. Can you guess what the first million seller record was, single record? Do you have any idea? Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer is an excellent guess. That's not the right answer. Happy Trails, that's a Dale Evans song. She wrote that. Comes later. Now, that Silver-Haired Daddy of Mine, back in the 30s, was recorded by Gene, sold over 1 million copies, and of course at that time that was a major event to be able to sell 1 million records. So Gene made his monies in different ways. Roy endorsed products, and then his TV show and personal appearances. We might stop right there. Any questions you might have about anything? And we're going to go through a lot of clips here and pick up on some other things. And I need to do it from up here, so it'll be hard. That's again, you can hear a little bit of John Wayne. The voice is dubbed, the guitar is dubbed. And what a voice, you know. I think I agree with you. Let's see if we'll just, let me back up a little. There's, can you recognize this guy? This is early Gabby Hayes. Before all the whiskers come in later. Always played an old guy. He was a fairly young guy, and he's in his 40s. He would always play a guy that was supposed to be maybe 60 or older. At any rate, here's another John supposed to be singing, John Wayne. It's bad. It's bad. And I'm going to go skip around a lot through you recognize who that cowboy was here? Well, it's hard for me to zero in here. There he is. Bing Crosby. Rhythm on the Range. Bing was a singing cowboy in one movie. Yeah, that's not Trigger, but similar looking horse. In this same movie is Martha Raye. Remember Martha Raye on TV? Bob Burns, who was a character actor in the movies, and you're going to see Louis Prima over to the left. You remember Louis and his band, Keely Smith? They were all on this Rhythm on the Range with Bing Crosby, supposedly a Western movie. Martha. Yeah, I remember her live TV show. Do you remember that live TV show? I remember once she actually got sick during the performance. She crawled up in a glass case that they had for a prop and did the rest of the acting there, but it was live, and she got sick while she was on TV. That was Louis Prima and Bing. Bing wasn't much of a Western. Bing could sing, yeah. We'll skip through all these guys real fast. Eddie Dean. Oh, here's it. Vaughn Monroe. Do you know Vaughn Monroe? Made 2 Westerns. You may want to turn your head. This is about as sexy as they got in Westerns here. Look at this. He's got she's got the shadow, at any rate. Walter Brennan. Bob Hope made 4 Westerns. This is Paleface, you know, Jane Russell. Jane had her attributes, not particularly acting was one of them, but Button and Bows won the Academy Award for Best Song one year. Let's move down to some big town where they love a gal by the cut of her clothes. You'll stand out in buttons and bows. I love you. In Son of Paleface, back then they even had sequels. Son of Paleface, Roy joined him, Roy and Trigger in Son of Paleface. And we'll see another funny clip. Bob, of course, is funny. One of Gene's first movies, Tumbleweeds. Whoop! What did I do?
Yeah, move it back. Just move it back. Just move it back. There you go.
Oh. This is 2 different movies he sings. Silver-haired daddy of mine is big. Gabby Hayes to the left in the mustache. Smiley Burnett, both of them are in there. Sometimes they were in the same movie, but not too often. Smiley Burnett's in the background. Smiley was very tight. He wrote a lot of the songs that were recorded by Gene and would sell them to him for $5 so Gene would get the copyright. Smiley would take his checkered shirts out of the movies, tear them up into inch strips, and sell them to the kids for $0.25. Really tight, but very talented musician. Wasn't classically trained, but he could play 100 instruments. I don't know if we'll get to see him. These 2 bad guys really get it by the end of the movie. They're making fun of Gene. We'll skip ahead to somebody. We'll skip around. I'm sorry for skipping, but we got it. This my favorite Western song. We heard it out there 2 or 3 times today. Ghost Riders. I love that song. This is Gene. He sings it twice in the same movie. This guy, Tom London, that you see the silhouette of, Tom made several 100,000 Western movies. They can't determine how many he made, but he considered this his best part. You'll see him. He's the old guy that's dying, and they're singing about Ghost Rider.
As the riders looked on by, he heard one call its name.
There's Tom. Hundreds of movies, westerns. That's Pat Buttram. Whoa, Dennis, who was that? There he is, the Lone Ranger, if I could get him. Well, I'm sorry about skipping around, but we gotta move on. This is one of Roy's movies. In real life, as well as the movies, Roy would take Trigger to children's hospitals and perform. They say Trigger never had an accident in any of those, of going up the elevators and stairs and everything, but wherever they would go for rodeos, he would find the children's hospital and go in and perform. That's in one of his movies. Here's Dale. Dale was in some movies before with Roy. This War of the Worlds is the name of this one. That's not right. That's Orson Welles. What is it? It's got war in the title. War of the Wildcats. There we go. It's a John Wayne movie. As you can see, Dale was very attractive and performed as a singer. Okay, the first movie together, The Cowboy and the Senorita. Dale plays a Mexican part, has black hair. Most of the time, Dale starts out, can't stand Roy in all the movies. It's a pretty familiar plot. Where did he come from? Don't want any part of him. And of course, by the end of the movie, it's solved. Although, I don't think, well, we may see a clip of Dale pecking Roy on the head, giving him a kiss. We never see a kiss between the two of them. Sometimes kissing Trigger, but not Dale. There's the Sons of the Pioneers with Gabby. Hugh and Carl Farr joined Tim Spencer, Bob Nolan as part of the original ones. And then we've had a lot of people in and out. In fact, we'll skip we won't find it because we're going too fast. But Festus on Gunsmoke was part of the Sons of the Pioneers for several years. There's Dale, now she's a blonde. And she's always engaged to this other guy who Roy proves is a big fake and he's the bad guy. Shug Fisher playing the bass, Gabby. I can't. Not lining up very good.
Did you ever fail to make others notice?
They would start out with a song in the picture, they would end with a song, there'd be two or three in the middle, one of which was always a novelty song. This one's a pretty good one between the two of them. Of course, at this point, she can't tolerate him.
I never see you again.
You know you're kind of cute.
Well, the nerve of some people. The nerve of some people. People.
Forget it, huh? It's nice and kind and gentle as a horse can be.
Different movie.
Carrying his dog.
Trigger's helping her out along the road.
And we're needing company, so how's about a ride for free?
Well, we missed it. The Trigger's pushing her all down.
Night seems to cover all company and shine.
His girl to embrace in some secret
My favorite
place.
Roy movie is Don't Fence Me In.
It could be never
This is the beginning
as seductive
of Don't Fence Me In. Dale is an undercover reporter, and this one she's taking secret pictures of these guys that shouldn't be doing what they're doing. And then she finally gets a vacation. Is going to go out west and stumbles across something else. She's in the boot of the stagecoach with Limburger cheese. Roy knows she's back there. He threw the cheese in. Gabby doesn't know she's back there. And Dale thinks she's stowed away and going to get out to this guest ranch. So Roy's giving her a ride. Can you see it all right? We can turn off the light. Okay. So they find their, well,
You never drove like this before. I'm giving the cheese a ride. Trying to knock the rough edges off.
Her rough edges too.
You hear that? Sounds like somebody hollered for help.
Maybe it's a cheese.
they get down, so,
I
yeah.
told you in town we have a reservation for you. So you just have to hitchhike your way back.
Supposedly they had to take 3 takes on that. Roy would have to come dry out and then go back and do it 2 more times. Oh, here's where she's going to give him a...
Roy, wake up. Please wake up. Oh, I'm sorry I shot that picture. I only meant to. Well, it was for your own good. Darn if I know how such a big love can be so nice sometimes. One minute I want to... Where have I heard that before?
Why didn't you do that in the first place? Surely.
I never hated anybody so much in all my life.
It, I only see what's next. Do we get stuck? This is the very early Sons of the Pioneers. There's Roy in the background. We'll skip a lot of different movies the Sons of the Pioneers made, 30 of them. There's Smiley Burnett playing some of the instruments he's capable of playing several at the same time. We need to skip over, sorry. I wanted before we quit here, show you a couple.
How come he got called? I can tell you a story about that young brother. Well, you look more natural just being ignorant.
And Sons of, and Don't Fence Me In, Gabby plays the part of Wildcat Kelly, if you know that song that Cole Porter wrote, Don't Fence Me In. And he's a retired bank robber way back when. Everybody thinks he's dead. Here, this lady's going to push the... He's allergic to flowers. And, you know, she puts it on his nose. Favorite Gabbett movie is Roll on Texas Moon, where he hates sheep. He's a cattleman. He hates sheep. So here comes this lamb that attaches himself to Gabby, follows him all over. And Gabby's gonna shoot him, and he won't shoot him. But here he's gonna shoot him. That's a Gene Autry movie there. Okay, during World War II, Hollywood Canteen, they made a lot of propaganda films during World War II. All the stars, Hollywood stars come out to be in this movie. They must have had 50 of them sitting around. Roy gets to perform Don't Fence Me In this one. And I think still he gets to rides Trigger and Trigger dances here, I think.
I'm on the right to the ridge where the west commences and gaze at the moon till I lose my senses. I can't look at hobbles and I can't stand fences. Don't fence me in.
There's, let you see Trigger dance.
Let's be on our way.
See if we... Okay. Little Trigger in Son of Paleface is in bed with Bob Hope.
Want me to steal your teeth?
Yeah, it's funny. Anyway, we're out of time here. Sorry about skipping back and forth, but there's a lot of funny stuff through there with Gabby and Smiley and Pat we didn't get to see. Can I answer any questions for you before we leave? Glad you could all come. It's a lot of fun to show it, and
Are you going to do your 6-hour program anymore?
why don't we come back about 10 this evening, and I won't be here. They had mentioned Osher through KU has continuing ed programs that a lot of retired faculty and other people give programs on different ones. And we do one on singing Cowboys. We don't have one lined up for fall, but maybe the spring we might be doing again. It's in the metropolitan area or Lawrence or Topeka, at usually assisted living places because the age is right for the people that enjoy it, and then others could come in. So yeah, we'll be doing some more of those, and It's a 6-hour thing spread over 3 weeks, 2 hours each day. Okay, yeah.
So how much is it for?
I think it's around 35 or 40.
For the whole thing? The 6
For
hours?
6 hours, yeah, for the whole, I'm not sure.
Did Gene Autry ever perform with the Sons of the Pioneers?
Sons of the Pioneers performed with him in those early movies. We saw a very brief clip,
But he wasn't,
but not later, no.
but he wasn't a member.
No.
There's a controversy. Which singer do you like better, Roy or Gene?
Well, I'm partial to Roy for everything. Gene probably had the more success as a recording artist in terms of record sales, though, because Rudolph, one quickie trivia thing, Gene watched the Rose Bowl parade year after year, and he would hear the kids saying who's the last one on the parade, not the horses, but the last one was Santa Claus. Gene picked up on that. Here comes Santa Claus, here comes Santa Claus. Big hit for him again, sold millions of records on children's music. Peter Cottontail, Frosty, he made a bunch of children's music. Okay, well, thanks for coming.